So, tell us about the Gong Show.
All right, the Gong Show. Now, we're up in San Francisco. We're selling MASH into syndication. And Gary Owens is up there, and they're selling this show called The Gong Show. It's in syndication. And we say, what the heck is The Gong Show? Everybody's talking about it. I had no idea what it was. So I came back to L.A. afterwards. I guess it was a big seller. And we kept saying, Gong Show, what would that? And I remember as a kid, remember I told you I listened to radio, and there was a show called Major Bose and the Talent Hour. And Major Bose used to have a little gong on his desk. And people would be performing, and if he didn't particularly care for him, he'd hit that little gong. And I'm saying, oh, now I get the idea where the gong came from for the Gong Show. So I'm watching the show. It's on at nighttime, and Gary Owens, I believe, is the host. And I see what they're doing, and I get this phone call. They said, Jamie, NBC wants to do the Gong Show as a daytime, across-the-board show. And they'd like you to be one of the first guests on it. You, Joanne Worley, and Jack Cassidy. And the host of the show is John Barber. So I said, yeah, okay, I know it's a talent show. And yeah. So we go meet at Chuck Barris is the producer of the show, welcomes us there. And they have C.V. Alberg, who's the model. And they have Milton DeLugg and the band. And the guys in the band, they're kind of dressed like in carnival outfits, you know, with the big wide stripes and the thing. And the panel, Jack Cassidy and Joanne and I are just dressed like we are now and so forth. And John Barber comes out and they welcomes everybody and he brings on the first talent. And of course, some of the talent that we're seeing now is these awful acts that they're doing, and we're trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? How do we, I'm not a producer or director, or I can't hire these people. I'm a fellow actor, and now I'm going to criticize these people. Something's wrong here. And they said, well, you can't do this. You can't say this, and you can't do that. And you have, if you don't like them, you gong them. And so the play, it wasn't really going anywhere. We couldn't do anything. And so I went back to my dressing room. We had our dinner break, and Chuck comes back, and he says to me, he says, what's wrong with the show? And I said, well, Chuck, I said, truthfully, standards and practices says we can't do this, then you can't do that. You can't, how many times you say, okay, take singing lessons, or go get your feet fixed to dance. And I said, you can't make comments about the individual themselves. He's got a big nose. Hey, you with the glasses. I said, and then obviously you're bringing on acts that are terrible. I mean, what can we do? So he said, well, what do you do? I said, why don't we make it like a party? Like, let us have fun. If they're doing something, like, why can't we do the same thing? Or let's say if Joanne goes to gong the person and I like the person, what if I fight Joanne off? Or so he says, oh, yeah, that's a... And I says, take the band out of the carny outfits. I said, why don't we do this? Put the band in tuxedos. Put C.V. Alberg, who's the model, in a beautiful evening gown. Have your female guests on the show, beautiful evening gown, and your celebrities in tuxedos to watch a guy crack eggs on his head. He goes, yeah. And I said, let's have some fun. Let's just make it like a house party in that. So he says, great, yeah. So now he tried to get John Barber to do that, but John Barber never got it. He thought he was looking for the next Mario Lanza or the next Barbra Streisand or whatever it was. So finally, they convinced Chuck to take over. And that's when Chuck took over. Everybody got into the tuxedos. If you notice that, they even had the little person, the midget Jerry. He was in a top hat and a tuxedo. See, he was in the band, was a tuxedo. And all these ridiculous acts, a guy hanging upside down by his feet playing a banjo and all these other silly things that went on. And of course, then, remember I said chemistry. Again, always works. They got J.P. Morgan on, Artie Johnson, and myself. And that became that chemistry that worked, that nucleus, because we played off of one another. We'd fight, we'd do all kinds of things that were absolutely silly. And the show took off. I mean, it was like the most popular show. We did a show one time. John Dorsey was the director of the show. And as you know, some of the things that Chuck used to do, he used to come out, clap his hands and point. and read the cue cards and everything else. So one show we decided on our own. This is JP and Artie and myself. We said, you know what? I'm sick of him doing that. Let's take over the show. Let's not even tell. We said, hey, to props, you got some duct tape and some rope? They said, yeah. So the show gets started like that. Chuck starts doing whatever it is now. He doesn't know what's happening. The camera people don't know what's happening. The producer doesn't know what's happening. We run out there. We grab Chuck on camera, and we drag him off, and the camera follows us around stage, and we tie him up backstage and put the duct tape on him, and we take over the show. Artie Johnson starts doing this, and JP and I in the act, and they were brilliant. They kept cutting back to Chuck, trying to get out of the rope so he could get back, for the show. We bring the axe on, and we did it. We gong, we did everything else, and there's Chuck still trying to get out of the ropes. And at the end of the show, we had to come up with a payoff. Turns out that Artie's gone mad, and he's tied JP and me up. We got duct tape on, and Artie closes out the show. Totally ad-lib show, but they allowed us to do that. At any rate, we did so many of those, and then we started with the little cards that we'd put out and right out in front of it. And then we started putting the dolls up on the stage. My wife was one of the first ones that bought one for Chuck, and he started putting those up on the stage. And it got to the point, though, as a lot of times I wasn't there. I'd be on the road doing theater, live theater, which is what I still do. And JP would sometimes get a little out of line. Sometimes, as you notice, they blipped her. She'd say some things on there. And then JP started to get a little risque. I love JP, great singer and everything else, but I tell you, you really had to rein her in. Then she started where she wanted to expose her bosom. So a lot of times what would happen, people didn't know this, when I would be fighting with her and get her on the floor, it wasn't to stop her from gonging, it was stopping her from exposing her bosoms. And so, unfortunately, one time I wasn't there, and she did do it. And oh my goodness, Standards NBC, they came down on Chuck and JP. And even though it wasn't on the air live, it was still taped, but you had an audience in there, with the kids and everything else. And so, oh my goodness. Anyhow, they told them, you better shape up and so forth. But I mean, they called me in all the time to do the Gong Show. Then there was the famous Gong Show with the Popsicle Twins. I think you remember that one. Oh my goodness. That was one. I was on that show, and he had the two kids come out, and teenagers, girls, erotically having a popsicle, each one of them. And I went out to the East Coast, but I'm not sure what happened on the West Coast. I don't know whether they cut that out or not. He was really something else. Chuck was. I had a lot of fun doing the show, and I tell you, I did 20 game shows in 2 days. As I told you, you do 5 game shows when you go on to do it. Well, it was a Saturday. I always did them on the weekend, and I'd get booked for Hollywood Squares, The Gong Show, Pyramid, Password, whatever. A lot of them were done at NBC. Some of them were done at ABC, Rhyme or Reason with Bob Eubanks. Anyway, I came in, and I'm doing The Gong Show, all right? So I finished The Gong Show, and as I'm walking out, I did my 5 shows. They had my tuxedo there and everything. The casting people from Hollywood Squares come running out, and they said, Jamie, one of our celebrities didn't show up. Can you do 5 Hollywood Squares? I said, okay, sure. I said, you got a blazer in there? I'll do what Vincent Price does. I have a blazer with 5 different ties. You just change your tie, and you sit in the square. So I did 5 of those, and that's 10 game shows. The next day, I was supposed to do Hollywood Squares. So I came in, and I did my 5 Hollywood Squares. As I'm leaving, Ruthie Goldberg, who was the casting director for The Gong Show, comes out and says, Jamie, one of our celebrities didn't show up. Can you do 5 Gong shows? So I said, okay, so I had my tuxedo. So I did 20 game shows in 2 days. And that's pretty good, considering I wasn't the host of any of the game shows.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Gong Show movie?
The Gong Show movie, I think that's, I believe they used that one scene that JP exposed herself in. I think they used that in the movie. I never saw the movie. I didn't see the movie. I did see the George Clooney one where Chuck was supposed to be the CIA agent and everything. I don't think that's true. But no, I you know what? I don't remember. I didn't watch the movie. I did so many of those gong shows. Chuck would always call me in. We did one at the Forum here in Los Angeles when the Forum was the place to be. Gong show specials, and I was good friends with Chuck. I was not, when I say good friends, in other words, we weren't social friends. But anytime he needed me for anything, for any of the shows, I was always there for him. And he was quite a character. He very successful man. I have on my wall here, I got ill one time and was pretty laid up in the hospital, and I got this silly letter from Chuck, note with him with the picture of Artie, JP, and myself with tuxedos on. I have it hanging up in the hallway there. Very funny letter from Chuck.
Tell us a little bit about Match Game.
Match Game, I didn't do that many match games, but I did do some of them. Gene Rayburn, it's a fun show. Again, they had their chemistry. Charles Nelson Riley and Richard Dawson. They had their Brett Summers. You know, they had that nucleus, that group, and then they'd pepper it with other people. Match Game was not one of the more famous shows I did. Password I did a great deal of, and then I did Pyramid a lot with Dick Clark. I did it with Donny Osmond. I did it with John Davidson. Hollywood Squares I did with Peter Marshall, and then Bergeron. I did it with him. I did some of the other game shows. Some of them I don't even remember the names of them. Some of them are funny stories. One of them, Bob Eubanks is a friend of mine, and Bob claims that famous story about him didn't happen, but eventually he admitted it did, and they showed it on the Newlywed Game. But there's one story, and I swear to you, somebody reminded me of this. It is a famous game show story, and I will tell it. Now, it's racially, but it did happen, okay? And if you go online to Snopes, is that what it's called? And Truth or Fiction, these areas on the internet, they'll tell you it didn't happen, but it did. I was doing Super Password. Bert Convey was the host. And I had played with a black contestant, a lady, very smart lady, and we were going to go on to play the bonus round. And in the bonus round, you have 60 seconds, and you have to get the person, your contestant, to say the 10 words in there. So, for example, the contestant would see a letter, which would be behind me. It would be, the contestant would be there, I'm here. The letter would be behind me, and the word that I'm trying to get that contestant to say would be behind the contestant, so the contestant couldn't see it. So, for example, if they see the letter C, and I want you to say Chevrolet, I'd say car or something, and you're supposed to come up with it. So you got 60 seconds. I forgot how much money we were playing for. And anyway, the first word that came up was deer. D-E-E-R. So the contestant sees the letter D behind me, okay? Now, I could have come up with any number of things to say. Bambi, I could have come up with anything. At that time, the song from The Sound of Music was doe, a female deer, ray, a drop of raining, whatever the heck it is. I don't know the lyrics of it. But that was what was so popular at that time. Everybody was singing that song and so forth. So you have to remember the time that this moment is taking place. So now remember, the word is deer, D-E-E-R. The letter is D. So Bert says, okay, for X amount of dollars, you got 60 seconds. Here's your first word, go. So I go doe, meaning female deer. And she comes back with knob. Doe knob. And oh my gosh. Bert collapses. The audience starts laughing. The contestant doesn't know what's going on, and you can't stop it because you're playing for money. You know, standards and practices are going to get upset. And I didn't know what was going on. I was trying to get the lady back, you know, into playing the game. It was for a lot of money and everything. Anyway, it just fell apart. It was, and now that happened. And if you go on Snopes, they say that didn't happen. That's racially disgusting and everything else. It happened. I was there. I mean, you can ask Goodson's son. I think Jonathan Goodson is still with us. Mark had passed away because Bert was collapsed. He couldn't get up off the floor, and I couldn't bring the lady back, you know, to get her into it because she didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know exactly what was going on. But that's one of the game show stories that's out there.
Can you tell us a little bit about doing the original Hollywood Squares versus the later version?
Well, yeah, the original Hollywood Squares I thought was much more fun because it was so fresh at that time. Then once you do a show like that, and then the writers start giving you lines to do, and then they start doing the jokes that they know are going to come out. Body part jokes, you know, every time you ask a question, the writers are going to come up with a body part. And it got very predictable, I thought. So I think it lost its credibility. And again, the chemistry, when you had Charlie Weaver and Paul Lynde, you know, then it had a good chemistry. Rosemary and various other people that they had on. And then after a while, it just got tired. That's all. And the same, these jokes, you know where they're going with it, the way they ask to phrase the question. You have to be careful of those because you can tire an audience out very quickly.
Did you have a favorite game show?
I love Pyramid and I love Password. Those are my two favorites. They were very fast shows, and you had to be quick. You had to really think. Pyramid was really tough. That was and actually, you know, the same, I think it's Bob Stewart. He's the same person who created both the shows. He created Password for Goodson and Todman, then he created Pyramid, which he owned, I think, with Dick Clark. So, yeah, they're good game show. They don't have those anymore on. It's most of the things are participation things. Then, of course, they tried the Gong Show. They brought the Gong Show back, and it didn't work because the panel was weirder than the contestants that they were having on. You had these people that you go, why aren't they up on stage and let's gong them?
We want to circle back to a couple things we skipped, one of which was your time as co-host on the Mike Douglas Show. Can you tell us a little about that?
Mike Douglas. That was one of the talk shows that I did, and I loved. I got along great with Mike. It was done in Philadelphia, and I used to fly back there. And again, I'd have to do these on the weekend because I was shooting MASH. And Mike and I just hit it off great, and so did the writers. Anytime he needed me, when he came to Hollywood, anytime he needed me, I was like the game show supernumerary. Anytime you needed somebody that didn't show up, get Jamie. Dinah Shore used to do that. Dinah say, I get a phone call, Jamie, somebody didn't show up. Can you do my show? Come on in. Merv Griffin would do the same thing. So I would do these things for Mike. I'd come in, and eventually he asked me to co-host. And so he said, what do you like to do? I said, well, I love movies. So what we did is we did a whole different kinds of things with movies, things with Cagney and other things. Then he'd bring on Margaret Hamilton because I loved her so much in The Wizard of Oz. She was the bad witch. And Billy Crystal was on there. He hadn't really gotten that famous yet. And I'm trying to think of some of the other names that appeared on the show. But it was so much fun. Mike was such an easy guy to get along with, and the writers were good. So that was a fun time. And, I got to tell you, I'm doing the Bob Hope special. And it's the gag in the show, it was during the Super Bowl time, is that we're all going over to Bob Hope's house to watch the Super Bowl. And Milton Berle and I show up at his house wearing the same dress. And that was the joke, okay? So so now what they did is they gave me this dress, the same as that Milton had on, but they also gave me a couple of extra pair of pantyhose in case they tore, something like this. So anyway, I wear the outfit. I go on, and we do the show, big laughs and everything else. And that night, my wife Joy and I have to fly out the red eye to Philadelphia to do the Mike Douglas show. Okay, so we have our suitcase and everything there. And she's going to be on the show. She'd never been on the show with me. She'd been on Tattletales with Bert Convy. She'd been on a couple shows with me, but she'd never been with Mike. So now we arrive in Philadelphia. It's the next day. We're going to do a segment of the show, and we're getting dressed in the dressing room, and Joy rips her pantyhose. She doesn't have any pantyhose, and I suddenly remember, wait a minute, I did the Bob Hope show. I says, I got an extra pair of pantyhose in here. So I give her the pantyhose. What husband would give the wife the pantyhose? So anyway, she wore the pantyhose to go on. Now I say, you never been to Philadelphia? She says, no. I says, well, wait till you see it. This is great. I'm going to take you to Taxon's Bookbinders. Great seafood in there. I know Mr. Taxon. Been in there many times. I was in there with Tony Bennett and that great Italian restaurant. And so I said, okay, but first of all, we're going to catch a cab. I said, it's late at night. I can't get you into Independence Hall, but you got to go see Independence Hall. You've got to go down Independence Alley. You've got to see the Liberty Bell. I said, these are all very important things to our history and our country. She says, oh, that's great. So we get in the taxi. We drive down. I said, this is Independence Alley. Isn't that great? I says, hey, let's get out. I says, keep the meter running. I says, all right, look, here, let's stand on this storm door here and peek into Independence Hall where Benjamin Franklin. And I said, isn't this exciting? Look at that. Oh, can you imagine? And all standing there talking and that. And I said, look, here's the Liberty Bell. It's cracked and everything. She says, I am really impressed. I said, I thought you'd like this. She says, no, not with the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall. The fact that you told the driver to let the meter keep running.
That's a good one. Can you tell us just briefly about your experience on the Cannonball Run films?
Oh, well, that was fun. That was absolute sheer fun. Al Ruddy, who's the producer of that, came on the set one day. Now, he was dear friends with Gene Reynolds because they had done Hogan's Heroes together. Al was one of the creators of that, and Gene had directed the Hogan's Heroes. And so Al said, look, I got this movie I'm going to do, and we have this crazy sheik, and we'd like for you to play it. And we'll give you star billing in the movie, etc. So I said, oh, my, that's fantastic. And I had known Burt Reynolds before anyway. And so I grew the beard and everything, and I couldn't believe it. We went on location. Hal Needham was the director. And the names that were in that movie, Roger Moore. I'm trying to think of the gal's name. She was the wife of some famous person, and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis and Dom DeLuise. And I'm trying to. I don't know if that one was Charles Nelson Riley was in that one or not. But I mean, went on and on and on. That wasn't the one with Shirley MacLaine. It was Adrienne Barbeau and some of the other great names, Richard Keel. I think Bert Convy was it. Jackie Chan. So we go on location, and we were in Las Vegas at one point, I think. Then we went to Decatur, Georgia, I believe, and it was in the summertime, and it was really hot. I mean, it was unbearable. Mel Tillis, I remember, was in it. And I'm trying to remember who his partner was in the car thing that they had. I don't know if it was Buck Owens, or maybe it wasn't Buck Owens, Roy Clark. At any rate, so it's like 2 a.m., and it's sticky hot, that summer southern heat. Everybody's perspiring. It's late at night. We're by the swimming pool. I think a car is supposed to go into the swimming pool, and we're all dying out there. Perspiration's coming out, and Roger Moore walks out. He's got this white suit on. He's got a flute of chilled champagne and a cigar, and there isn't a bead of sweat on him at all. And we're all looking at him, and we'd like to strangle the guy. Looked like he stepped right out of GQ magazine, Not a bead of sweat. Everybody's dying out there. Anyway, it was one happy family. We all get together. We'd all go out together to a restaurant at night. Dom DeLuise would go in the kitchen and cook. We'd go to a mama and pop Italian restaurant. I think it was the second one. That's the one, Telly Savalas and Frank Sinatra and Dean and Sammy. And I remember we'd all, Shirley MacLaine, and we'd go to the restaurant. Dom would go right in the kitchen, and everybody would bring out the food. We'd all be one happy family. I'm trying to remember the one story that we had was trying to think of Telly Savalas. He was doing Ford commercials at that time, and so they gave him Ford cars to use, and he had his brother his brother Gus was with him, and at any rate, Telly liked to drive a limo, so he had a limo with him. And he'd have a cap, and he'd drive the limo, and he'd have Gus and me sit in the back, and we go to a Greek restaurant with Telly as our driver. I mean, all these people were really crazy. A fun time. I remember when Frank Sinatra came on the set, everybody was there to watch Frank do his scene, and I had a golf match. I wasn't scheduled to shoot. So I went out and I played golf. It was at a public golf course. And I had this little bag with me, and I had a religious medal that my grandmother had given me. It looked like it was expensive, but it wasn't. And I had it in a bag, and I tucked the bag underneath in the car. We went to this public golf course to play golf. And somebody had taken a baseball bat, hit the glass in the car, and stole my bag. And they thought that medallion was worth a lot of money. And jokingly, I said, gee, Frank, if I had known you wanted me to come, you didn't have to do this. I would have watched your performance, Turns out they found the guy. He tried to peddle it, and the cops found it, and I got my medallion back at my grandmother. I have it upstairs in the place. But it was so much fun. It was like one big party after another. And you'd go to dailies, and everybody'd have drinks sitting there watching. Who invites you to the dailies? Usually they don't want you to see them at all. We'd all be in there laughing and having drinks. The movies got terrible reviews, but made a lot of money.
All right, we just want to sum up a little bit now. Are there any shows or roles that you've done that we haven't talked about that are special to you?
Well, I did the first mini-series, which was with William Holden, The Blue Knight, and that's where I met William Holden. And at that time, I was having problems with the MASH front office. I didn't think I was making enough money. I was actually not making very much money at all. But I was skeptical about wanting to get a raise because I didn't have one of the larger agency offices. I had a smaller agency. And at that time, a lot of times, if you go in and try to renegotiate for a lesser-known actor and you're not a powerhouse agent, they would blacklist you and not buy your other clients. And that's how the agent would make his or her living. So my agent had come to an impasse. They weren't about to give me a raise. This has nothing to do with Gene Reynolds or Larry Gelbar. It has to do with the studio, 20th Century Fox. I won't tell you the gentleman's name. They call him the Hatchet Man, that decides that he'll tell the agent, listen, don't bother me because we have a script in the safe that says Klinger steps on a landmine, and it's all over, so don't ask for money. So one day we're sitting out, we're at a location, I'm telling William Holden my problem, and he says, I used to have that problem with Harry Cohn when I was under contract at Columbia and that. He says, then it's up to you, Jamie. You really have to be the one. Your agent can't do it for you. It's you, and you have to take the gamble. He says, I know what you do on that show, and I know you told me what you're making. You should be making much more than that. And he said, to me, if you go in and you try to be fair and you don't hold a gun to their heads, that he said, you'll get your way. So I said, oh, okay, don't hold a gun to their head. So I go back the next day, and I'm figuring, okay, I'm going to get this raise. So stage 9 is right across from where the Hatchet Man has his office. The windows are facing this way. So I go to prop department, and I said, you got a prop gun? He says, yeah. I said, give it to me. So he said, what do you know? I said, give me the prop gun. So I take the prop gun. I go out stage 9. I, like a cartoon, go behind a tree, behind the bush, you know. Now then I peek in the window. Now his desk is facing the door that leads to his office, but he's in his office. So I go around the side. I have my combat boots on. Klinger's not in a dress. I'm in my fatigues in this particular episode. And I kick the door open with my foot. And I point the gun at him. I said, listen, you SOB, this is the way the deal's going to go. And he says, what are you, crazy? And he ducks behind the desk. I said, you better give me that raise, you know. Well, he started laughing. And he said, okay. He says, call the agent in. He says, I can't go beyond this. This is just too funny. So he became a good friend, and we did get the raise off of that. But I had heard stories that other people had tried this. I won't tell you who the actor was, but he was on a series, and I didn't know that actors had tried this before, but apparently he went in and he had a 38, a real 38 gun, and he went to the hatchet man. He says, all right, you give me that razor, I'm going to shoot. And the producer, the guy who was in charge, opened his desk drawer and pulled out a 45, put it on his desk. He says, you were saying? So apparently that's not a ploy that it's often used, in other words, by actors. So I just thought I was being very clever. Anyway, I did get my raise, and we became good friends.
That's great. What are you working on currently?
Doing a lot of theater work, live theater. I'm not in demand in television, which I wish I was. I love television. That's my favorite. But, hey, you do what's necessary. I have been so lucky. I played Broadway. I've played regional theaters. I've done road companies. And lately, I seem to be doing 2 shows. One is called Lend Me a Tenor, which is a farce comedy. And it was done recently on Broadway, resurrected with Tony Shalhoub and Anthony Paglia, I think. But I've done it I did it in Chicago many years ago for about 6 months. It was a big hit on Broadway originally. And then last January, I did it in Kansas City, a theater I played back. It's the New Theater. I played there 7, 8 times. Don Knotts was one of the first people that played there, and they loved Don very much. So I've kind of taken over in terms of being the regular person that comes back, but they bring in all the names. They do great productions there, first class. I did Lend Me a Tenor there for 12 weeks. I've been doing Tuesdays with Morrie, the Mitch Albom 2-person play. Was a big bestseller in New York Times, best-selling book. It was done off-Broadway. It was done as a movie with Hank Azaria and Jack Lemmon. And I started that in Hamilton, Ontario, about 2 years ago. Got fabulous reviews. People came to see it. And so I did a tour of Canada. I played Edmonton. I played Calgary. I played Mississauga, which is just outside of Toronto. And more recently, I did it in British Columbia. And then between that, I did Lend Me a Tenor again down in the theater in Jacksonville. And now I'm ready to do, after the new year, Tuesdays with Morrie at a beautiful theater in Pinehurst, North Carolina, just 6 performances. And I must say, I've gotten, and I say this with great humility, wonderful reviews. And I've enjoyed doing the play. I learned a lot from Morrie Schwartz, the old professor from Brandeis. I even used some of the lines at Harry's memorial, Harry Morgan's memorial. It's one of the things he says, the wise and wonderful things you want to say at the end are the kind of things you should say all of your life. So that's a good policy to live by. Don't wait till the last minute to tell somebody that you love them. You have to go after life and embrace it, because when you do, life will embrace you back in ways you never imagined. And he says, love is the only rational act. Without love, we're birds with broken wings. So that's some of the little bit of philosophy that Maury puts out.
Nice. What advice would you give to aspiring actors?
Take up another trade. You know, I don't have any advice. The business is so different today. You got to do. I wrote a book, and I said, you know, actors, you have to have a passion for what you do. It's a calling, just like a rabbi, a priest, a minister, a good teacher, because you don't know what's going to happen in your life. You don't know whether you'll be successful or you won't be successful. And so that passion, that love that you have to have for it has to carry you through. There's no guarantee in this business. You could be the most beautiful woman in the world, the most handsome man in the world, the greatest singer in the world, the greatest tap dancer in the world, and if the breaks luck doesn't come your way, it doesn't mean a thing. So it really, you have to realize that you're going into a gambling business. There's no assurance that whatever gift you may have is going to get you to where you think you should be, and try to make a living. That's why I said I'm a lucky guy, because with my limited talents and abilities and looks and everything else, for me to have been around this long and to have been as successful as I am is unique, and to have worked with the people I have. You know, a lot of these people you've already done interviews with for your Academy Archives, the Ernie Borgnines and Larry Gelbarts and the Alan Aldas and Loretta Switz and a lot of names that are on there. And I had the great pleasure of working with all of them. So no guarantee. If you love it, give it a try. You don't want to tell a person, don't do that. Don't say no to them, because then they want to do it even more and show you that they can do it. But be prepared. That's the very important thing. You got to be prepared in this business. And that means going out there and learning your craft. Do shows. Get into live theater. That's why our cast was so great. Every one of those actors all came from the live theater. We all had experience.
You obviously, your early career got started because of your nose, almost. Do you find that was help?
My wife happens to think I'm very handsome. I don't know. But, yeah, well, you know what? I almost got my nose fixed, actually. There was a lovely showgirl I was crazy about. But years later, my wife met her, and she's the one that talked me out of it. She said, don't ever do that, because you got to be who you are. Otherwise, you'll look like everybody else out there. So I had put a down payment on it. I was going to get it fixed. I'll do an old joke, but the Lincoln Tunnel wasn't available for the operating. So, you know, it's one of those things. I have a lot of fun joking with it and that. And I guess when you're a kid, you might. Of course, I grew up, I told you, in my neighborhood. It was a Lebanese, Greek, Jewish, Italian neighborhood. I thought everybody had noses like this, you know, until I went out in the world. I go, oh, my goodness, there's people with small noses. Danny Thomas used to say, hey, listen, with our noses, we take one breath in the morning, and that's it for the rest of the day. We don't have to keep breathing, you know. So, yeah, as I told you, you know, Red Skelton with all those jokes and everything. But as I said, yeah, you know, that's all part of you. I told you, Dean Martin had his nose fixed. Off camera, we were talking. He had my nose, and it was Lou Costello that gave him the money to get his nose fixed. But Dino was a handsome guy and a singer and everything else. I'm this blue-collar actor. I'm somebody's uncle, cousin, somebody's grandfather, you know, that kind of stuff. So it works well with me.
What's your proudest achievement?
Proudest achievement? Wow. Well, when you say an achievement, I'll be truthful with you. There were a couple of things. I mean, obviously, in my career, MASH was certainly the highlight of that. When I was a kid, I watched a show called Guys and Dolls. Ironically, Alan Alda's dad, Bob Alda, was Sky Masterson in it. But I saw a road company of it in at the Paramount Theater in Toledo, Ohio, and I went, oh boy, I'd love to do that someday, and I wound up playing Nathan Detroit on Broadway, replacing Nathan Lane for almost a year there. Those are things in your career. The kind of thing that I think is great is that I was never a good athlete. I couldn't play basketball or football or baseball or softball or golf or anything else. But I did take golf up. And I took it up when MASH went out of production. And I was invited by Dinah Shore to play in the first tournament. She had her LPGA tournament. And I wound up, my very first person I ever played with was Nancy Lopez and Beth Daniel, two Hall of Famers. And I had this call from my hometown, and a buddy of mine I'd grown up with, he was, his father was a shoe repairman, and he would sew harnesses and things and barter at farms for food. And he wound up, my buddy did, owning 20 McDonald's back there, became a multimillionaire. And he said, Jamie, there's a fella here in town, used to be a caddy for Craig Stadler, his name is Judd Silverman. He said he's got this idea about having a tournament in Toledo, which would be for charities. It would be for the LPGA, not the PGA. And they said if your name would go on it, the commissioners said if your name was on it, and my McDonald's people bankrolled the tournament for the first few years, that we could get this as a stop here for charity. So I said, I've just taken the game up. I'd like that, but I'd like it the way Dinah Shore had it, with a big show and celebrities coming in and playing in the pro-ams and that. And he goes, whoa, we don't have any of that money. But he said, let's see what we can do. So Frankie Avalon, the singer, and Tom Dreesen, the comedian, who was Frank Sinatra's opening act for many years, they were members at where I play at Calabasas Country Club. That's them calling now. And at any rate, they were members, and they said to me, Jamie, if you just pay for our airfare and our billeting in the city of Toledo, we'll come and do the show for you for nothing. So I said, okay, you guys got a deal. So what happened was they came, we did the show. We lost money the very first year. We haven't lost a dime since. This is my 27th year with the tournament. We've got title sponsors. We've been on television, on ESPN, and on the Golf Channel. And we have raised over $6.5–7 million for children's charities and abused women of Northwest Ohio. And I think that's probably one of my nicest achievements, giving back to this little hometown that I grew up in, where I'd go to the movies every week. Great movie theaters, the Paramount, the Rivoli, the Pantheon, the Palace, the Granada, the Lowe's Valentine, the Lowe's Esquire, the Princess Theater, and give back to that community, because that's where I got my start, where I went into the darkened theater and had these great dreams of being in this wonderful business that we're all in.
How do you want to be remembered?
Remembered, I like to be remembered that I entertained you. I wasn't great, but you got a few laughs, and that I was welcome in your home or on your movie screen. Yeah, that's the fact that you enjoyed my company.
Excellent. Well, we did enjoy your company. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's wonderful.